So I'm going to read two poems today. The first one is from the collection The Good Thief by Mary Howe, and I discovered it for myself a couple of weeks ago. I started reading this collection that I had gotten from my mom. And the poem that I'm going to read from that collection is What the Angels Left. At first, the scissors seemed perfectly harmless. They lay on the kitchen table in the blue light. Then I began to notice them all over the house, at night in the pantry or filling up bowls in the cellar where there should have been apples. They appeared under rugs, lumpy places where one would usually settle before the fire, or suddenly shining in the sink at the bottom of soupy water. Once, I found a pair in the garden, stuck in turned dirt among the new bulbs. And one night, under my pillow, I felt something like a cool, long tooth and pulled them out to lie next to me in the dark. Soon after that, I began to collect them, filling boxes, old shopping bags, every suitcase I owned. I grew slightly uncomfortable when company came. What if someone noticed them when looking for forks or replacing dried dishes? I longed to throw them out, but how could I get rid of something that felt oddly like grace? It occurred to me finally that I was meant to use them, and I resisted a growing compulsion to cut my hair, although in moments of great distraction, I thought it was my eyes they wanted, or my soft belly. Exhausted, in winter, I laid them out on the lawn. The snow fell quite as usual, without any apparent hesitation or discomfort. In spring, as I expected, they were gone. In their place, a slight metallic smell and the dear muddy earth. The next poem I'm going to read is called The Last One by W.S. Merwin, and it's from his collection The Lice, which was published in 1967. I came across this collection, at the beginning of this year. I'd gotten a bunch of collections of poetry from my mother 5 or 6 years ago, and I'd never really looked through them, and I started going through them, and I happened to pick this one up, and I discovered this extraordinary poem in the collection. The entire collection is wonderful, of course, but here is the last one. Well, they'd made up their minds to be everywhere because why not? Everywhere was theirs because they thought so. They with 2 leaves, they whom the birds despise. In the middle of stones, they made up their minds. They started to cut. Well, they cut everything because why not? Everything was theirs because they thought so. It fell into its shadows, and they took both away. Some to have, some for burning. Well, cutting everything, they came to water. They came to the end of the day, there was one left standing. They would cut it tomorrow, they went away. The night gathered in the last branches. The shadow of the night gathered in the shadow on the water. The night and the shadow put on the same head, and it said, now. Well, in the morning they cut the last one. Like the others, the last one fell into its shadow. It fell into its shadow on the water. They took it away, its shadow stayed on the water. Well, they shrugged, they started trying to get the shadow away. They cut right to the ground, the shadow stayed whole. They laid boards on it, the shadow came out on top. They shone lights on it, the shadow got blacker and clearer. They exploded the water, the shadow rocked. They built a huge fire on the roots. They sent up black smoke between the shadow and the sun. The new shadow flowed without changing the old one. They shrugged, they went away to get stones. They came back, the shadow was growing. They started setting up stones, it was growing. They looked the other way, it went on growing. They decided they would make a stone out of it. They took stones to the water, they poured them into the shadow. They poured them in, the stones vanished. The shadow was not filled, it went on growing. That was one day. The next day was just the same, it went on growing. They did all the same things, it was just the same. They decided to take its water from under it. They took away water, they took it away, the water went down. The shadow stayed where it was before. It went on growing, it grew onto the land. They started to scrape the shadow with machines. When it touched the machines, it stayed on them. That was another day. Well, the next day started about the same. It went on growing. They pushed lights into the shadow. Where the shadow got onto them, they went out. They began to stomp on the edge, it got their feet. And when it got their feet, they fell down. It got into the eyes went blind. The ones that fell down, it grew over and they vanished. The ones that went blind and walked into it vanished. The ones that could see and stood still, it swallowed their shadows, then it swallowed them too, and they vanished. Well, the others ran. The ones that were left went away to live if it would let them. They went as far as they could, the lucky ones, with their shadows.